It's finally here! Nearly 3 years after the final chapter of the Attack on Titan manga, the anime ending just aired, and man, there is a lot to talk about. Parts of the manga ending were cut out, other parts were straight up changed and expanded, and that setup for a potential sequel at the end was crazy. By the end of this video, you will know all the differences in the anime ending versus the manga ending. I will explain everything that was altered so that you're not missing out on any important info, and I will talk about the potential future of the Attack on Titan franchise. By the way, if you are anime only, you definitely missed some context from the manga, so for you especially, I urge you to watch until the very end. If you enjoy our Attack on Titan content and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like and comment for that YouTube algorithm. And if you want me to unleash my final Titan form by hitting 2 million subscribers on this channel, do me a huge favor and subscribe right now. We are so close. Finally, this video will of course contain Attack on Titan manga spoilers. We are talking about the ending. The manga and anime are finally over, so let's get into it. Okay, the first major difference is that in the scene where the founder Ymir leaves the gate open for the pigs to escape, in the anime we clearly see her holding a jug, but in the manga there is no jug. Could this be a special magical jug? Okay, I'm kidding. That's not a major difference, but there are some real differences. The final episode / movie adapts chapters 135 through 139, and chapter 135 of the manga is adapted extremely faithfully in about the first 15 minutes of the final episode / movie. The only big question that some anime onlys might have here is about Falco and how he became the Flying Titan. This was mentioned in the previous episode, but a lot of people were confused even when this happened in the manga, so I will quickly explain it right now. Because Falco was turned into a mindless Titan using Zeke's own spinal fluid before he ever became the Jaw Titan Shifter, after becoming a Titan Shifter, he started experiencing dreams that actually turned out to be memories of the previous Beast Titans. As the Jaw Titan, he was expected to experience the memories of former Jaw Titans, especially because the previous Jaw Titan was Colt, Falco's older brother, so they have a direct blood connection. However, the fact that Falco was experiencing the memories of former Beast Titans was extremely unusual, and Annie was genuinely surprised when Falco first told her about it on the ship. Falco told Annie that he was having vivid dreams, and in his dreams he saw that a previous Beast Titan could actually fly through the air. Not only that, but Falco had the strong feeling that he too is capable of doing the same thing with his own Titan transformation. He believed that he could also become a Flying Titan. Annie didn't believe it at first, but because Falco was so certain, they decided to try it out. When Falco successfully transformed into a Flying Titan, Annie and Gabby decided to climb on top of him and head towards the rumbling in order to help their friends. Annie initially wanted to sit the battle out, but when a literal Flying Titan presented itself, she kind of took it as a sign that she had to take part in that final battle. Chapter 136 is also adapted very faithfully, although some scenes from chapter 134 are also included at this point. These are scenes of the rumbling destroying countries all over the world, and later on in the final episode, we see scenes of Historia giving birth. In the manga, these scenes appear earlier chronologically, as I said in chapter 134. There is one small part of chapter 136 that is omitted from the anime. When Reiner first encounters Gabby, Annie, and the Flying Titan Falco, at one point he asks Falco if he remembers the promise he made to Reiner. The promise was that Falco would save Gabby from the dark future they all face. Falco thinks to himself that yes, of course he remembers, but for whatever reason this brief exchange is not shown in the anime. The convo between Armin and Zeke within the paths goes pretty much the same, but after watching it again, I thought it had some really deep philosophical meaning that a lot of us may have rushed through when we were first reading the manga because we just wanted to see what happens next. Zeke has this view that all living species, including humans, are essentially just being manipulated by nature to survive and multiply. All of their actions are driven by this need, and by the fear of death, which nature instills in them in order to motivate them to keep living and multiply. Zeke wonders whether the rumbling is actually a bad thing, because all humans will die eventually, and maybe death isn't so bad because it finally frees you from nature's manipulation. It might actually be a relief, because at least then you no longer have to worry about surviving and growing and multiplying. But Armin remembers some moments in his life that are seemingly completely trivial, like running up the hill to that tree with his friends, staying in on a rainy day to read a book, walking through the marketplace, and so on. He tells Zeke that these trivial moments have nothing to do with advancing the species and multiplying, and yet they are the moments in which he was truly happy. Zeke then thinks of the time that he just randomly played catch with Tom Xaver, and he realizes that yes, Armin is right. Even though randomly throwing a ball back and forth has no connection to surviving and multiplying, he would have been happy playing catch with Xaver forever. The message here is that we need to live in the present moment. Happiness never comes from worrying about the past or the future. It comes from living fully in the moment, enjoying the little things, and just being for being's sake. In some ways, it's a very Zen perspective, since Zen teaches us that fear comes from worrying about this and that and lamenting about the past and future, but happiness comes from just being at one with the universe and being one with the now. When you're sitting down, don't worry about anything, don't think about anything, just sit. When you're eating, just eat. Don't be this or that, just be. As Zeke is about to die, he finally realizes that maybe he should have actually enjoyed life more, including the little things like nice weather. By the way, for those of you wondering, in the scene where all the former shifters that we know decide to help our heroes stop Eren and the rumbling, that Ram Titan is what Tom Xaver's Beast Titan form looked like. He was the former Beast Titan before the power was inherited by Zeke, and Tom was also Zeke's mentor and his only true father figure. Chapter 138, the second last chapter, is also adapted quite faithfully, and this is where we get that scene of Eren and Mikasa in the cabin. Eren used the paths to show Mikasa an alternate future. If Eren had not been able to bring himself to continue fighting and initiate the rumbling, he and Mikasa could have enjoyed some peaceful time together before he died because of Ymir's curse. But then Marley would have invaded Paradise and everyone they know would have been killed. Would this have been a happier ending? I guess I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. However, it is important to note that during this scene, Eren asks Mikasa to promise him that after he dies, she will throw his scarf away. He says that she is going to live a long time after this because she, of course, doesn't have Ymir's curse, so she should forget about Eren and be free. Eren tells her to please forget about him, and this is something that we have to remember because I will come back to it later. It is extremely important for understanding Eren's character, and many have completely misunderstood and mischaracterized the conversation that Eren has with Armin about Mikasa. Back in the real world, Mikasa decides that she cannot keep that promise to Eren. She cannot throw the scarf away, but she also cannot allow this tragedy to continue. She decides that she has to be the one to kill Eren, and she then enters the mouth of his colossal Titan form and detaches Eren's head from the Titan. In doing so, she kills Eren, even though she loves him and always will. And that brings us to probably the most controversial scene in the entire series, the conversation between Armin and Eren within the Paths. People have used this conversation to absolutely assassinate Eren's character, and a lot of stuff is either misinterpreted or just deliberately framed in a negative way to portray Eren as some sort of crybaby incel or simp or whatever. If that's what you think about Eren at the end of this, then you clearly do not understand the ending, and I'm actually considering doing a full video on Eren just to explain his entire character progression for those who are actually interested. Drop a like and let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see that video. The convo starts off with Armin telling Eren that he understands why Eren tried to push him and Mikasa away, although Armin doesn't think that he needed to go so far as to beat him up and say all those hurtful things to Mikasa. Eren wanted to push his friends away from him in order to turn them into the heroes who would form an international alliance with the warriors of Marley and put a stop to him and to the rumbling. The survivors of the rumbling would then know that it was Eldians from Paradise and Eldians from Marley who came together to heroically stop the evil Eren. And so the world would hopefully stop demonizing all Eldians. On top of that, since Eren knew that he would destroy 80% of humanity before he was stopped, even if the world wanted to attack Paradise, it would take them decades if not centuries to recover enough to launch the attack. And it would also give Paradise enough time to prepare for any potential future attack. Interestingly enough, in the manga, the part about 80% of people being destroyed in the rumbling is revealed by Eren early on in the conversation. He says, "Did you really have to go that far for our sake?" But he doesn't seem nearly as freaked out about the prospect of so many people dying as you might expect from Armin. Armin's reaction to this information was one of the big criticisms that people had of the final chapter. So let's put a pin in that for now because the anime ending does actually change this. In the anime, Eren does not talk about the 80% stuff yet. Instead, he goes on to reveal the truth about the founder Ymir's motivations. He reveals that despite everything that King Fritz put Ymir through, she actually loved him, and she spent the past 2,000 years obeying him and doing exactly what she thought that he would want her to do. She was striving for freedom, but she was a slave to her love. This was a hugely controversial part of the ending when it first came out in the manga, because it makes Ymir's motivations just so disappointing and tragic. She is driven by her love for her own abuser, and this leads her to kill countless people for the sake of this man's power and ambition. I'm not saying this type of toxic love doesn't happen in real life, but it's just so sad and so terrible. Actually, one of my most controversial videos was a video where I argued that Ymir Fritz started out as a victim but then also became a villain in her own right. There were points at which she, as an adult, could have done the right thing, but she didn't. So even though she is a victim, she also eventually became a victimizer. I will link that video down in the description if you want to check it out. But yeah, quite a few people felt that she was only a victim and that my take on this was completely wrong. Eren says that throughout these 2,000 years, Ymir has been searching through the paths for someone to free her from her slavery. And she finally found that person in Mikasa. Mikasa's headaches throughout the series were actually instances of the founder Ymir peeking into Mikasa's life through the paths. Eren isn't sure why exactly it had to be Mikasa, but I will explain that in a little bit. Eren then reveals something extremely important. He says that his mind has been completely messed up by the power of the founding titan. And that's because the founder's power makes it so that there's no past or future, because the past, present, and future all exist together at the same time. This leads us to another extremely controversial moment. The moment in which Eren reveals that he was seemingly the one who told the Smiling Titan to leave Bertolt and go devour his own mother instead. Because of course Bertolt wasn't supposed to die yet, and Eren had to ensure that the future he knew was inevitable would indeed come to pass. People have interpreted this as meaning that Eren, the Eren as an individual character, had a choice between saving his mother and killing her, and he willingly chose to kill her. But it is not so simple, and Eren literally said that very thing moments earlier. Once he became one with the founding titan, Eren began to experience the past, present, and future simultaneously, and to him it all felt like one and the same. Obviously, normal humans can't even comprehend this concept unless you're a fully enlightened Zen master or something. But essentially, because Eren is one with the founder, he experiences the founder's actions, even the founder's actions from the past, as his own actions. He feels like he had a part in pushing the Smiling Titan towards his mother because the founder did it. And he later became one with the founder, past, present, and future. But at the time that his mother's death occurred, Eren was of course his own person. He was a separate character entirely. He had not yet consumed the founding Titan power. Some people seem to think that once Eren became one with the founder, he could literally decide to change everything. He could just change the past and save his mother, or prevent the walls from ever being built, or I don't know what else. But that is not the case. The only time Eren affected the past directly was when he sent future memories through the Attack Titan back to his father, who was a former Attack Titan user. The Smiling Titan was not an Attack Titan user, so Eren could not have used future memories to affect the past in that specific situation. Eren repeatedly states that the future he saw is inevitable and it cannot be changed no matter how hard he tried. So it's not as simple as him refusing to save his own mother because he's just an idiot. I firmly believe that he couldn't actually change things, but because he became one with the founder, he felt like he was partially responsible for the founder's past actions. But it is kind of ironic for me to say that Eren was not an idiot, because he literally calls himself an idiot in this conversation with Armin. And that leads us to perhaps the single most controversial aspect of the entire ending: Eren's true feelings for Mikasa. During their convo, Armin gets mad at Eren for telling Mikasa to just forget about him and move on, and we know that Eren said this to her privately in their conversation at the imaginary cabin, because I just talked about it earlier on in the video. Eren tried to make her promise to throw away the scarf and just forget about him. Armin feels that this kind of thing is cruel of him to ask Mikasa, since she has always loved him and put him above all other things. But that's when Eren admits to Armin that no, he doesn't really want her to forget about him and find another man and move on. Eren begins to cry, and he says that he wants Mikasa to think about him and no one else for the rest of her life, and even after he dies, he wants her to be hung up on him for at least 10 years. Armin is surprised that Eren would say something so pathetic, and Eren immediately tells Armin not to ever repeat any of this to Mikasa herself, because he really does want her to be happy. It's just that deep within his heart, he also wants to be with Mikasa. He wants to stay with his friends. He doesn't want to die. Armin tries to convince him that they can find another way, but Eren says that he has to initiate the rumbling. He doesn't even know why, but he has to. The future is already predetermined. The future is already happening. It's already happened. It can't be changed. At least that's what Eren believes. So many people interpreted what Eren says about Mikasa as an indication that he's some kind of simp incel who wants Mikasa to suffer because of him, because that would satisfy his own selfish ego. But that's clearly not true. Eren deliberately pushed Mikasa away so she would no longer love him. He asked her to promise him that she would move on and forget about him, and he even told Armin to never tell Mikasa what he said about wanting her to only be with him or only think about him for the rest of her life. This statement by Eren was just a human moment of weakness on his part, a moment that he shared with Armin, his friend, privately. Eren is still human, he's still a teenager, he's still completely inexperienced with relationships, and some part of him wishes that things could be different. He wishes that he didn't have to die and that he could be with Mikasa and that she would only love him forever. But because he knows that things can never be that way and he will die soon, he does want her to move on, even though he wishes things could be different and that she could only be his. I really don't know why this is so hard to understand for some people, but I do feel like the majority of you guys get it, right? Okay, so in the anime, it is only after the conversation about Mikasa that Eren reveals to Armin for the first time that the rumbling will trample 80% of humanity before he is inevitably stopped by the International Alliance. In the anime, Armin is visibly more upset when he hears this than he was in the manga, and he grabs Eren by the collar and angrily asks him, "How could you?" Eren explains that destroying 80% of the world outside of Paradise will reduce the rest of the world to the same level of civilization as Paradise, which will ensure that the world won't be able to launch a one-sided reprisal that destroys the island. Nevertheless, Eren then goes on to say something else. He says that even after that, this conflict doesn't end. And as he says this last part, Eren is not talking about some sort of philosophical hypothesis, he is stating it as fact, just like he stated all the other things as facts. But how is this possible? How could Eren know about a conflict that happens over a century or multiple centuries after his death? I will return to this at the end of the video, because this is an important change that the anime made to the ending of the manga. When Armin asks him to stop the rumbling because it hasn't even happened yet, Eren literally says that he can't, because it's already been determined. He doesn't say that he doesn't want to stop it, he says he can't. He even adds that he tried to change the future many times, but no matter what he does, no matter how many times he tests the different scenarios, things always occur exactly the same way they did in his memories of the future. If you go back to this conversation in chapter 139 of the manga, the anime actually adds a lot. So this is probably the key change that the anime ending makes. In the manga, it is not so clear that Eren can't change the future, but the anime ending makes this a lot clearer. Eren wanted to save Paradise and his friends, but he didn't necessarily want to kill 80% of humanity to do it. Not unless he absolutely had to. He tried to avoid it, but no matter what he did, it was always inevitable because it was always predetermined. In the anime, Eren even tells Armin that he is a slave to freedom. He wanted freedom so badly, but in order to attain it, he became a slave to the Founder and the timeline that the Founder was inevitably following. He wanted to protect his friends, but he failed, and he asks himself, why did it turn out this way? He clearly regrets that things had to be this way, and he even calls himself an idiot, which, by the way, is not in the manga. Eren says that if he wasn't an idiot, maybe another resolution could have been possible, but he could not find it, and so this became the only possible outcome. Now, at one point, Eren does say that some part of him wanted to see the world outside of Paradise as blank plains free of humans, just like he and Armin had dreamed about back when they thought that humanity had gone extinct beyond the walls. This was his fantasy of true freedom, of breaking free from the walls and then being able to go wherever he wanted and do whatever he wanted without worrying about other humans and their wars and conflicts and other problems. Armin says that he shares in this sin because he contributed to Eren developing this false idea about the outside world by showing him books and telling him stories about a vast and completely uninhabited world beyond the walls. Armin then says that the two of them will see each other again in Hell, if it exists, where they will both have to pay for the sin of killing off 80% of humanity. I will say that the anime does a much better job of showcasing anime's true character in this conversation. In the manga, he was quick to accept the fact that Eren kills 80% of humanity, but in the anime he is far more upset, and he later says that they both belong in Hell for the sin of allowing this to happen, so kudos to the anime for that. I have to admit that the part about Eren saying that he kinda wanted to flatten the world did confuse me a bit because it contradicts his earlier statement about trying to change the outcome and regretting that he couldn't change it. But I'm just gonna assume that this is Eren saying that a part of him wishes that Armin's innocent fantasy of an uninhabited world outside was true. Because if it were, that would mean true freedom without problems and conflicts. A fictional, vast, and endless wilderness is what would have made Armin and Eren truly free, but it was not to be because that is not what the outside world was. Overall, I think that the anime ending makes this conversation a lot better, although it's still not perfect, and I feel like Isayama really struggled to get what he wanted to say across in this dialogue. I don't know if he needed more scenes or something else, but it just isn't as clear as it could be, although again, it's better than the manga. After Eren is killed by Mikasa, Ymir can finally move on and the power of the Titans disappears from the world. This is because Mikasa showed Ymir that even if you truly love someone, you can let them go. So, just as Mikasa chose to end Eren's life to save the world, even though she truly loved him, Ymir chose to finally stop obeying the will of King Fritz, even though she truly loved him. Mikasa then takes Eren's head and leaves the battlefield because she believed that the others wouldn't let her give Eren a proper burial. You know, they might want to destroy the head, just in case, but Mikasa's like, no, let's bury the head beneath the tree atop the hill where Eren used to take a nap as a kid. What could possibly go wrong? 3 years later, the island of Paradise has created a modern army to help them fight any potential foreign invasion that might come from the remaining 20% of the world. At the same time, the international heroes who stopped the rumbling are working as ambassadors for peace and trying to negotiate between Paradise and the rest of the world. Through diplomacy, they are trying to decrease the possibility of future conflict. And then we get to a clear difference between the anime and the manga right at the very end. As time passes and Eren's tree grows, the town below continues to expand until it reaches all around the tree. In the manga version of the ending, we see modern skyscrapers around the tree, and these are the kind of skyscrapers that you would see in our own world. That is when another major conflict occurs. Airplanes bomb the buildings, anti-aircraft missile batteries shoot back at the airplanes, and eventually the city is destroyed, and what's left is a post-apocalyptic landscape. In the manga, we are led to believe that this new conflict happens about 100 years after the rumbling, kind of like the equivalent of the distance between, say, World War I and our own modern world right now. But in the anime, it is very different. The buildings that we see sprouting around the tree do become regular modern buildings at one point. But then they continue to grow and evolve until they become futuristic cyberpunk buildings, like something you might see in Blade Runner or Ghost in the Shell. That is when the new conflict occurs, meaning that in the anime ending, the years of peace last much longer. We're talking maybe even several centuries instead of just about 100 years. Eventually though, the conflict does occur, and we still get the post-apocalyptic landscape, just like in the manga. We see that same child with a dog wandering the post-apocalyptic wilderness, and the child eventually stumbles upon Eren's tree. Not only is the tree still there, but it is now absolutely massive, and it looks eerily similar to the tree that the founder Ymir stumbled upon before she was turned into a titan by that glowing centipede creature. In the manga ending, the child is seen at the foot of the tree, and there is a large cavernous opening there, just like with Ymir's tree. But in the manga, the child is still some ways away from the tree, so you're left to wonder whether the child will go into the cavern or not. In the anime, it is very clear that the child is about to walk into the cavern, and so the cycle is about to repeat itself. Just like Zeke said, life continues to multiply, and the centipede creature found a way to reproduce itself. Mikasa's decision to bury Eren's head under that tree spawned another centipede creature, which took over another tree, and although the power of the Titans had disappeared from the world after Ymir decided to stop obeying the will of King Fritz, that power will now return to the world as the child from the very end enters that opening beneath the tree. Personally, I absolutely loved this final part of the ending, because it does such a great job of reinforcing the most important theme in Attack on Titan. Human nature leads humans to try to survive and multiply, and yet, unfortunately, it also leads them to wage war against each other. So much of human history is an endless cycle of war and suffering, and with or without the power of Titans, this doesn't change. I mean, just look at our own world and you'll see that this is true. All our modern technology and access to all the information in the world still can't stop us from waging war on each other. The rumbling led to centuries of peace for Paradis, but eventually it was destroyed by war. And let's face it, even if Eren's rumbling destroyed 100% of humanity outside the island, it's likely that the humans on the island would have then just started fighting each other. Attack on Titan was never an idealistic story about how humanity can move beyond war and suffering. It was always a brutally realistic portrayal of how humanity has actually been acting throughout history, not what we wish we could be or what we sometimes pretend to be. At the same time, the child at the end proves that despite all the war and suffering, humanity remains resilient. If that child and that dog survived the apocalyptic conflict that we saw at the end, then others surely survived as well, so humanity continues to live in spite of it all. And this is where I want to remind you of the statement that Eren made in his conversation with Armin, at least in the anime version of the ending. He said that even after the rumbling, this conflict doesn't end. And he said it as a fact, not as some personal theory or speculation. Now, as far as we know, major conflict on Paradis did end after Eren's death, at least for a few hundred years. So, could it be that Eren saw the future memories of that kid at the end, the new founding Titan, and that's how he knew that even long after the rumbling and his own death, the conflict doesn't end? Could it be that some part of Eren is still alive in that new centipede creature, and will some part of Eren live on within the new founding Titan? Those are some intriguing questions for a potential Attack on Titan sequel. I'm not saying that there will be a sequel, especially since Isayama had such a hard time with the ending and with everyone's reaction to the ending, but if he did ever want to make a futuristic post-apocalyptic Attack on Titan sequel, he definitely did a good job of setting it up there at the very end. What do you guys think of the new anime ending, and do you agree with my points in this video? I personally think that the anime ending is significantly better than the manga ending, although it's still not perfect. It doesn't change the fundamentals of the ending, but it does fix some issues and it adds additional context that is much appreciated. That said, although I do have my critiques of the ending, I think that the overall story of Attack on Titan is phenomenal, easily a 9.5 out of 10. If you'd like me to make that full video on Eren that I mentioned earlier, let me know down in the comments and subscribe. If I see a lot of new subscribers coming in from this video, I will take it as a sign that you want to see the Eren video. If you're looking for more Attack on Titan content right now, check out that video I made about Ymir Fritz being a villain. Link on screen and in the description right now.